the Radio Forest Podcast.
Hey, buddy, it's Al Pitrelli from TSO. How are you?
Good. How are you? I haven't seen you since we went record shopping.
Let's do that again soon, shall we? That was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. What have you been up to since then? How have the tours, and how's the family? How's life?
Everything is fantastic. Thank you for asking. I hope the same by you.
Recently, we just passed the anniversary of 9/11. How is that being an East Coast New York guy that's got to hit different than some of these other places? It's got to hit closer to home, right?
Well, yeah, I used to live in New York City. It's a really interesting question, so it's going to take me a minute to collect my thoughts because Absolutely. It is such an unbelievable tragedy. I mean, so many people died in that attack. So many families were affected, and it lingers on with diseases and cancers and things like that had happened to the first responders. I mean, I kind of don't know what to say other than I hope that it never happens again. I mean, to be attacked on our own soil, to level those two buildings that were iconic in New York City, and to kill all the people that were involved. How senseless. What was the point? Every year, September 11th comes around, and that would be the equivalent of like maybe my mom and dad or my grandparents, December 7th, 1941. They will live in infamy. I don't think anybody's ever going to completely get over it. And why should we? We should always, hang on to that scar and look at it as education. Remember, how bad things can really get. So it's a horrible day and it's a horrible memory, but I will always, take time out to pay my respects to those who lost their lives that day.
Where were you at that time? It's imprinted where you were.
Yeah, I was in a hotel room in Seattle, Washington. I was on tour. I remember my wife at the time, she was in New York. I said, give me a call, about, 9 a.m. just to make sure I'm up and moving because I got a busy day, and that was it. And then my phone started ringing at 6 a.m. And, I kind of looked, I was like, I told you 9 a.m., Pacific time, whatever. And I picked up the phone. She's like, a plane crashed into the World Trade Center. I'm like, what? And, I just looked around for the remote to the TV and I turned it on. She goes, I think it was an accident. And as I turned it on, the second plane hit it. And I said, get out of town right now. This is not an accident. And I just remember being frantic. And then we lost all cell service. I was frantic, and then, you're watching this, obviously, the next several shows that I was doing with that band at the time, we canceled those because, the world was like, what just happened? Nobody really knew what was going on. And then I remember watching the towers collapse and I was like flipping out, like, where is she? Where are my children? What's going on? And then, obviously, I flew home as quickly as I can get home, which was several weeks later because, they locked up all the, the airports. Nobody was doing anything. It came to a screeching halt. And that was, I think the not knowing was the most terrifying thing about it. But I still, as a matter of fact, I still have the key to that hotel room. For some reason, I threw it in my bag and I never threw it out.
What was that like when you first get back to New York? It had to be just this somber experience, something like most of us will never ever go through because you land in a city that just went through this tragedy. There's still rubble. There's still people looking for people. There's signs everywhere. You fly into the airport. You get off the plane. Your first time back since 9/11. What's that like?
Horrifying, depressing, thankful that, I'm back, home. Assessing the damage. There was still smoke, like you said, debris and nothing about it was right. It was so surreal. It was almost like watching one of those, doomsday movies, like where they level a city and you walk back into it. And everything is different. Everybody's demeanor is different. Everything changed. And I don't know that it's ever completely bounced back. I mean, not too long after that, I moved out of New York City. We sold our condo on the Upper East Side and just said, I'm done. Let's go. My wife now and our two young daughters, we go into town every couple months. Because I want them to experience that small yet incredible piece of real estate, and we'll always go down to Ground Zero and pay our respects and our love and prayers and thoughts, in perpetuity. Because again, I'll never forget it. And I don't want my children to dwell on it, but I want them to be well aware of it as part of our history of what had happened.
Were you on tour with Megadeth at the time? Because I know you're getting ready to record Rude Awakenings, the live album, and it was going to be in Argentina. The band decides, let's do it in Arizona instead. Now, I think that was because of 9/11, right?
Yeah, I wasn't leaving the country. I just wanted to go home. I mean, I had started the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, I think about 5 or 6 years prior to that. In 95, we're approaching the 30th year that Paul first asked me to play the opening notes on Christmas Eve Sarajevo. And we had sold a bunch of records, and we had done a tour in 99. And it was really starting to build great. And then, I got the call from Jimmy DeGrasso, a very dear old friend of mine, can you just help out with this band? Marty Friedman wants to leave, and we just need you to sit in for a couple weeks. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I'd love to help. And Paul was like, no, go do it. We'll be good. And that led to, about almost 2 years of me kind of, sitting in until they found a permanent replacement. But one of the things on the itinerary was going to South America. And I'm like, dude, I'm not leaving the 48 Continental. I want to go home. If you don't like it, well, maybe it's time for us to part company because I'm done with this. And I was like, you know what? And I just want to go home. I want to go back to the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. I want to have a normal life. I do not want to do this touring around the world all year long and missing out on everything ever again. And, we did I thought it was in Phoenix we had filmed that concert. Fantastic show. I'm glad it was documented. I was glad and proud to be part of it. It was a wonderful experience working with that band. But 9/11 was like one of the things that just tapped me on the shoulder and said, that's enough.
Wow, I didn't know that directly affected pretty much your musical career. And I know it's been a while, and this is kind of a Hail Mary lob pass, but also just a question out of curiosity with your knowledge of those guys, the Daves and Megadeth. Do you think Dave Ellefson will ever get back into Megadeth, knowing Mustaine and just knowing their relationship and the history and you peeking into that world for a while?
I don't know. They have a very long relationship. I mean, David Ellefson had been with Dave Mustaine from the jump. I'm going to say had to be sometime in the early 80s, if I'm not mistaken, or middle 80s, I don't know. I mean, I speak to David Ellefson, a couple times a year, and he always comes out to the show in Phoenix, wherever we're playing. And he's like been a brother to me, from the jump when I first started working with him. He was always there with me, and we became the best of friends. Whether or not he'll work with Mustaine again, don't know. That would be a question for him. I mean, I would love to see, the original, as many of the original guys get back together because it was such a crushing band and they were awesome. But whether or not, he can mend his relationship with Mustaine, no idea. I'm not privy to the details of what's going on with that. But, I spoke to David the other day, and, he's touring and doing his thing, and he sounds great, and his kids are all growing up and graduating college. And you know what? On this side of 60, man, just enjoy your life and don't worry about the little things.
You've got a brand new show, right? The Lost Christmas Eve tour. What's the genesis of it, and how long did it take to kind of come up with this?
So the show is The Lost Christmas Eve, and that's what the story is that we're going to do this year, which was the third installment of Paul O'Neill's Christmas trilogy. We did the show in its entirety. I think the last time we did it was probably in 2012 or 13, give or take. Fantastic story, fantastic show, and we just haven't done it ever since. Why, I don't know. Other stories, other shows, other things have come up. Wonderful. So when I got home from last year's tour, I took 2 weeks to catch my breath and just kind of hang with Nicole and the kids. And then we started having our meetings and our conferences and our emails back and forth and conversations. Well, how are we going to make next year's show bigger and better? Because we do that every year. Like a Super Bowl team who wins the Super Bowl. Well, that's great, but it's in the rearview mirror. And now you got to rebuild everything all over again just for a shot at that title one more time. So we don't take last year for granted. We worked really hard to put on a great tour last year, but I want to make this one even bigger and better. So I was home and I was like thinking to myself, what are we going to do? And I ended up listening to the album, The Lost Christmas Eve, top to bottom in its entirety with the poetry being recited. And I was like, this is a great story. And I was like, why haven't we done this in a while? Because a lot of the songs on that record we do in the set anyway, and that's a lot of the people in the audience, like some of their favorite songs, like Wizards in Winter and the Bachel's Canon and all this other stuff. And we started having those conversations, and we decided, okay, let's do this one. Because it's familiar to our audience. I have about half the people in the audience who I affectionately call repeat offenders. They come back year after year after year, sometimes show after show after show. And they know the story, and they love this story. So there's the familiarity of their tradition that we're going to keep intact. But I always want to put a spin on it. I always want to keep them back on their heels a little bit by surprising them. That's kind of where it is, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's imperative to Paul O'Neill, myself, and the entirety of the band to always do something special and different because we owe that to our audience. I've heard 1,000 times, and I'm sure you're privy to this as well, people saying, we play your music in our houses from, Thanksgiving to New Year's, or we don't really kick off the holiday season until we come see you guys, play live. That's a wonderful compliment. I'm so proud of that. I couldn't have envisioned anybody ever saying that to me as a guitar player. But it's also an enormous responsibility because I owe these people something better every time I put that Les Paul around my neck.
$1 for every ticket sold goes to a charity here in Boise. You let us pick. We picked the Women's and Children's Alliance, the WCA. Why do that? Why is that so important? And why, I mean, you're giving away thousands of dollars that no one's saying that you have to. So clearly this is the decision. You're like, this is important to me, and this is what we're doing.
Well, first of all, thank you for bringing that up. This was Paul O'Neill, from the jump. I've known Paul since 1985, and we became really good friends. And then 10 years after that is when he asked me to start working with him in the studio, and we became the best of friends. And, he was my producer, my big brother, role model, all that. Everything he did I found very interesting because he was like super smart, super creative, and just an incredible human being. And I'd walk, let's say we were walking to the studio from the subway, 21st Street and 5th Avenue, walking around, and I turned my back. I was like, where did he go? And he's like half a block behind me, reaching into his pocket, handing some homeless person a $20 bill or a $10 bill, whatever he had in his pocket. And I'm looking at him like, what are you doing? He's like, look, the $10 bill is not going to change my life, but it may change this person's day. And if I can help change their day, give him a chance, maybe he'll have it better tomorrow, And that sentiment just resonated with me. And you fast forward to 99, when we did our first show at the Tower Theater in Philadelphia, and he came up to me and he goes, listen, we're going to donate $1 from every ticket that we sold today. Maybe it was 2,000 tickets. I don't know what the cap on the Tower was at the time, but whatever we did, however many tickets we sold there, that's what he put back into the community. And he goes, and we're going to do this from the first ticket we sell tonight to the last ticket we ever sell, whatever that may be. That was 20 million tickets ago.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't really dwell on that stuff. I don't look in the rearview mirror a lot. I don't really kind of add up the box office stats. It doesn't concern me. What concerns me is the artistry that Paul created, or the art form, I should say, that Paul created, and making sure that it's the best presentation it can possibly be. But every so often, somebody will bring up these numbers to me, and I'm like, we did what? Really? A lot of tickets, dude.
Yeah, last quick question. What was it like recording Aqua with Asia? I've always loved that album. I think it's a little bit underrated. Maybe it's a fan favorite. How was that process? Were you on every song or just kind of helping out here and there?
No, pretty much. They had asked me to come play rhythm guitar on it because they wanted a little bit more modern, aggressive rhythm guitar style. And, Steve Howe was one of my favorite guitar players. So I was thrilled just to listen. You're talking about, Jeff Downs, Carl Palmer, and Steve Howe. Three of my heroes from their respective bands over the years, and to work in Advision Studios in London and for them to, kind of just like treating me like one of their own, that was like a bucket list moment, to say the least.
Well, it's Al Pitrelli, the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. They're playing in Salt Lake City and then coming to Boise Thursday, November 21st. That's Extra Mile Arena in Boise. $1 of every ticket sold back to the WCA here locally. Al, thanks for the call. We'll see you in November, man.
I can't wait, brother. Thanks. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Stay well, and my best to your family.